created a sweet and poignant story as a debut offering. False River, based on true events, sets the idyllic scenes of life on a farm and the family that at all costs live by rules of fairness, equality and some seriousness. Her ability to create vivid pictures takes and transforms the reader back to the days where life was a little simpler but definitely still very complex. Dominique Botha joins me now to talk about her debut offering. Dominique, good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Sam. Thank you very much.
Just for the benefit of the viewer, I didn't really want to give it away in the intro. Can you give us a brief synopsis of False River?
False River is a novelistic evocation about my relationship with my older brother Paul, in which I'm both a character and the narrator, charting our shared rural childhood on a farm in the Free State through to Paul's death from a drug overdose at the age of 27 in London.
There's something interesting that you do in this book, Dominic, and I mean, you know, this is obviously looking back, but somehow you've managed to capture the little Dominic's voice and how you describe stuff. Was that on purpose?
Yes. It's a chronological narrative, so the narrator starts off young, and gradually as the story unfolds, obviously the narrator's voice changes slightly to eventually become that of an adult. But I think it's quite a challenge to do that without infantilizing the perspective. Yeah. And I hope I've succeeded in doing it.
Talk to me about that trip down memory lane. Why this story? I mean, there's just so many aspects of your life you could have taken and put words to and have people like myself and other readers read it. What about this story in your life said, I have to tell the story and I have to kind of, I don't know if it was top of mind to make it funny, but there are some seriously funny moments in this book.
You know, I think it's very common that the first story is always an autobiographical one with which the writer clears their throats. And, you know, this was obviously the fundamental happening of my childhood, my relationship with this older brother who then spiraled out of control and died tragically. So I think if there was going to be a first story, this was the first story that was going to be told.
Talk to me about that relationship between you and Paul, because it's funny, some moments Paul seems a little bit irritated by you, some moments you are almost like you're guarding him, you're watching him constantly. I mean, there's issues at school with him because he writes too slow, and then in the middle of the night you happen to get up and you see Quibus going into Paul's room. Talk to me about, just take me back to, what was that relationship like between Dominique and Paul?
You know, I think in the same way that one's parents are these sort of original mythological characters, an older brother always holds a very particular place of the hero almost in any kind of family. And I think that was particularly true of Paul because he was such a charismatic, brilliant and wild character. But at the same time, I think I had a sort of instinct that the very strength was also his weakness. So I sort of slipped into a role almost as a guardian, but not necessarily one that could protect him from himself, because you were always standing on the sidelines, too sort of worshipful of the person rather than being able to lead them into an area of safety.
There are moments that I have to remind myself that I'm actually reading parts of someone's life that someone is carefully crafted, because sometimes I feel, especially with the way you describe things, that this could just be a piece of work that was created by an amazing person who has this creative output. But we have to remember that this is actually a segment of your life.
Do you have to remember that, though? I don't necessarily know if that's necessary. I think.
Is that what you wanted the reader to be able? Because you were saying earlier that the status of a good piece of work is the fact that you forget that you're reading real life.
You know, it's called a novel, written by Dominique Botha, in which Dominique Botha is a character. So I think in a way I make it uncomfortable for the reader from the outset. And partially why I've done this is because I think that memory is incredibly fallible and we can't rely on it. So when you go back and you recreate something, you either have to be incredibly factual or you have to acknowledge that retrieving a memory is committing a first act of fiction.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you, I mean, False River is your debut novel. Why did it take so long for you to put pen to paper? Or has there been other things that you've been busy with?
I think as a child growing up, as I said, in the shadow of this older brother with his extraordinary writing talent, and I'm not blaming him, I blame myself entirely for it, one felt a little bit in the shade and stunted. And it was only many, many years later after his death, when I realized that the memory of him was essentially fading, that I felt this very strong compulsion to put pen to paper and to write that down, and through that process have become the writer I perhaps should have been a long time ago already.
But you never say all good things comes to those who wait. Well, thank you very much for joining us. That's Dominique Botha, author of False River. It's available at all good bookstores. We encourage everybody to go and get it. It's a bit autobiographical, but I promise you it's an interesting read and it's super funny. If you've read it, let us know. Morning live at sabc.co.za.